I lay in bed feeling weak and ill. Paul, my husband, grinned and remarked, "I only married you because you're the boss's daughter." I glanced at the gloves and scarves I had painstakingly made for him, now thrown away as if they were unimportant. He appeared so disappointed in me, and I knew I had to wake him up to the truth. His comments hurt. The idea of him realizing how mistaken he was in believing that everything was going his way made me laugh. Kelly Riley is my name. Paul and I have been wed for 6 years. Despite the fact that we are childless, we have been living together in harmony. Paul spends a lot of time away from home for business. He usually tries to spend time with me on his days off, which helps me deal with the loneliness I sometimes experience. My father, who was Paul's supervisor at the time, introduced us. Paul advised me to become a stay-at-home wife after we were married. I supported Paul and had plenty of time for myself, so I thought it was a fantastic idea. I began exercising, learning to sew, and forming friendships with the neighbors. I experimented with a variety of pastimes, but knitting and sewing ended up being my favorites. I used to knit Paul gloves and scarves every winter. I wasn't very good at it at first, but I improved with time. Paul eventually assured me that they were just as excellent as store-bought ones. I became even more passionate about sewing after hearing his lovely remarks. One day, I hoped to sew with our unborn kid. Paul grinned when I brought it up to him and said, "Maybe I'll join in and learn when the time comes." I felt content in my life during times like this. When Paul had days off, I always made sure to spend time with him and take good care of the house. We lived well because of his high pay, and I undoubtedly appeared extremely fortunate to others. I didn't have any grievances and assumed that we would keep living in silence like this, just the two of us, hoping to have a kid someday. However, things began to shift around 3 years ago. As usual, I was waiting for Paul to get home one evening. I suddenly felt lightheaded and passed out. Paul hurried me to the hospital once he got back from work. I was resting in a hospital bed when I woke up. I found out that my ailment wasn't mild, and that I would have to live with it for the rest of my life from Paul's talk with the doctor. Although fortunately not life-threatening, the doctor cautioned that it may occur again. They advised me to remain in the hospital till I felt somewhat better. Paul informed me, "It looks like you'll be in the hospital for a while, but it's okay," after noticing my concern. "Anytime I have some free time from work, I'll stop by. Together, we overcome this." My uneasiness subsided as he talked while holding my hand. Though there was no genuine reason to believe such, I had faith that everything would be well with my supporting hubby at my side. Paul kept his promise and came to see me virtually every day after that. He attempted to lift my spirits, held my hand, and inquired about how I was doing. He got me my favorite stitching supplies after I informed him that the hospital days were tedious and long. Sitting together, we would stitch while discussing little events from the day. It was quite enjoyable to teach my awkward spouse how to sew, and it temporarily distracted me from my ennui. For over a year, these joyful times in the hospital continued. As part of our annual custom, I knit him another scarf last winter, but I observed that Paul was coming in less and less after that. Now I counted myself lucky if he appeared once every several weeks. I initially assumed that he was simply overworked, so I kept myself occupied with stitching. In order to surprise him the following time he visited, I even began knitting a pair of gloves. I was hoping to give Paul the gloves as a present when I was released from the hospital, because the doctor said I would be able to return home before the end of the year. I made those gloves with all of my love and work in the hopes that they would help us get through our time apart. However, I was devastated by Paul's response when he eventually paid me a visit after a protracted hiatus. Instead of being pleased when I gave him the gloves, He regarded them icily and said, "Are you still producing these? Now they're just starting to bother people." Then, without hesitation, he gave me the divorce papers and the scarf I had crocheted for him the previous year. It appeared as though he had never even worn the scarf. "How come you haven't been in the hospital for 3 years? I can't continue to care for you, but I've heard you'll be released shortly," he remarked. "We should get a divorce." I looked down at the divorce papers when I heard Paul's words. He had already signed them. I thought to myself, so this is where we've ended up. To be honest, ever since he stopped visiting me regularly, I had considered the possibility of divorce more than once. I tried to push those thoughts away, convincing myself that he was just busy with work. But deep down, I knew better. The Paul I first knew would never ignore me, no matter how much work he had. If his job had really gotten busier, he would have told me. When he started disappearing without any explanation, I had a feeling this was coming. That's why, when I asked him why he wanted a divorce, I wasn't as upset as I thought I'd be. I wasn't trying to hold on to him. I knew I had probably become a burden to him. If the kind Paul I first knew was now asking for a divorce, I had to face the truth. I figured I didn't really have a choice, but I was still curious. He had once promised we'd get through this together, so I wanted to know why he had changed his mind. When I asked, Paul responded, "Isn't it obvious? Ever since I married you, all I've had are problems. I'm sick of the scarves and gloves you give me every year. I only married you because you're the boss's daughter. How can I be expected to deal with you being sick on top of everything else?" He laughed in a way that felt like he was mocking me. It was as if all the joy I had found in our life together, all the talks we had about love, happiness, and loneliness, meant nothing to him. He made it clear that he thought I was a fool for believing in those things. He continued, "Who even wears a handmade scarf anymore without feeling embarrassed? Getting gifts like that is just annoying." As I listened to him, I glanced at his neck and noticed a high-end scarf I didn't remember giving him. Compared to the scarves I made for him, this one was obviously of much better quality. There was no point in comparing mine to that one. It made me wonder if he had ever actually worn any of the things I made for him. He must have hated them all along, and I just never realized it. After I was hospitalized, my father retired from the company. Shortly after that, it meant Paul no longer had to pretend to care about me to stay in my father's good graces. Plus, having a sick wife might have been a convenient excuse for him at work. In the first year of my illness, he made a big show of visiting me whenever he could, balancing work and showing concern for me. I could easily imagine my father, before he retired, praising Paul at work, saying how hardworking he was while also taking care of his sick wife. Paul had built this image of being a caring husband, and his coworkers respected him for it. But now it seemed that once my father retired, Paul didn't see any value in me anymore. The part of me that had once been useful to him had been realized, and now he no longer needed me. When I shared my thoughts, feeling sick inside, my husband looked surprised. Then he casually admitted, "Well, it did make work easier. When I mentioned you, everyone felt sorry for me and treated me well. If I worked a bit of overtime, they praised me for being responsible. And if I wanted time off, all I had to say was my wife is sick." He said all of this without a hint of regret. He had used my illness to his advantage in ways I had never noticed. As for the promotion I'm up for, he continued, "I mean, the others are idiots. But I do have to thank your illness for that." I listened quietly with my head down. When I finally looked up, I saw a smug grin on his face. The man I once loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. This was his true self. "Well, if I was able to help you, I guess that's good," I said. "We probably won't see each other again, so take care." I handed him the divorce papers. He had no more use for me after that and quickly turned to leave. And just like that, our divorce was final. After you left, I cried softly to myself. After some time, I was discharged from the hospital and went back to my parents' house. When my father heard what had happened, he was furious. "I never thought he could be that kind of person," he said, his voice raised. But for me, it didn't matter anymore. I calmed my father down and told him that once I cleaned up the house, I wanted to move back in with my parents. They understood and told me to do whatever made me happy. For now, I decided to live with them. Before moving back in with my parents, I wanted to visit the house where I had lived with my husband. But when we got there, I found that the front door lock wasn't working. My parents and I exchanged confused looks and decided to ring the doorbell. A stranger answered the door. Feeling puzzled, I asked him about the situation. He told me that he had bought the house a while ago and had been living there for a few months with his wife and child. They seemed happy. My parents were even angrier after hearing this, but I didn't want to cause any trouble for the new family. I bowed my head and quietly left. However, I couldn't just leave it like that, so I called my ex-husband right away. On the phone, he answered casually, "Oh yeah, I sold the house while you were in the hospital. Keep the money from the sale as like compensation for me. It was my house to begin with, so you don't really have any complaints, right?" I couldn't help but sigh at how indifferent he was. I wish he had told me sooner. From what the new owner said, the house had been sold quite a while ago. My husband probably put it up for sale about a year ago, around the time he stopped visiting me. Even if he had planned to divorce me, selling the house without discussing it with me was just outrageous. Our divorce had already been finalized when we signed the papers, but since I was still in the hospital, we had agreed to talk about compensation and dividing assets after my discharge. We had a meeting planned for next week, but he decided to act on his own. It was unbelievable. What made it worse was that he didn't even think he had done anything wrong. So I calmly told him over the phone, "You really don't understand anything, do you?" "Huh? What do you mean?" he asked, sounding confused. "I'll explain everything in detail next week," I replied and hung up the phone. I smiled at my worried parents and then turned to my father. "I need a favor," I said, sharing my plan with him and asking him to help me get ready for what was coming. "I understand," my father said, his face serious but supportive. "I've already prepared the necessary documents. There's not much time before the meeting next week, but we'll manage." I could see a hint of regret in his eyes, probably because he had once recommended my husband to me. But his anger at what my husband had done seemed to drive him to help me as much as he could. I thanked my father and waited for the day of the meeting. The thought of seeing my husband's reaction made me smile for the first time in a while. With my father's help, we got everything ready for the meeting. We decided to hold the discussion at my parents' home. My parents and I sat together on one side, and my husband sat alone across from us. I'm sure he knew my parents were hurt by the divorce, but it didn't seem to bother him anymore. He didn't show any sign of respect toward them, and his face even held a hint of a smile. His attitude was arrogant, as if he didn't have anything to worry about. "I'm the victim here," he began, "but I'm not going to ask for too much. The money from the sale of the house will be enough." He spoke as if he was being generous, like he was doing us a favor by not asking for more. Seeing his smug attitude, my father's face turned red with anger. I gently placed my hand on his to calm him down. There was no need for us to get upset. We knew that in this discussion, my husband was the one who would be at a disadvantage, not us. "There's something important we need to talk about first," I said, keeping my voice calm. I spoke up, and my father handed over a document. It was proof that the land where the house stood was owned by him. Yes, the house was in your name. There's no question about that, I said. But the land the house was built on belongs to my father, and he still holds the title to it. That's clear from this document, right? My husband's expression changed slightly, his brow furrowing. So what? He replied. The house was mine. No one has the right to complain. Do you think you can get back at me with that? He chuckled as if he found the whole situation ridiculous. I continued calmly, it's true that the house was in your name, and legally you could sell it. I'm sure you checked all of this before you sold the house, and there's no legal issue with your actions. My husband seemed confident, knowing there was no problem from a legal standpoint. However, I said, for the family who bought the house, this is a big issue. You sold the house, but since we still own the land, my father can charge them rent. That would definitely cause them trouble, don't you think? The situation isn't what they were led to believe. I paused before continuing. Now, neither my father nor I intend to charge them rent or make them leave, but we also don't plan on just giving away the rights to our land for nothing. In that case, we would sell the land to the family. We wouldn't demand monthly rent, but it would be a problem for us if they didn't buy the land. My father gifted that land to us to live on, not for it to be handed over to strangers, I added. And if they don't buy it, the family could sue you. As I said, the deal wasn't what they expected. Can you imagine their frustration? They thought they were buying their dream home, only to find out the land isn't theirs, and they now have more expenses. After we obtained proof of my father's ownership of the land, we went straight to the new family and explained the situation. Thankfully, they understood and agreed that if there was any trouble, it was the seller's responsibility. If things didn't go well with the negotiations, they made it clear they would sue my husband. When I saw my husband's face turn pale, I knew he finally understood the gravity of the situation. He realized that no matter what, this was going to cost him a lot of money because of his mistake. In a trembling voice, he asked, "What should I do then?" I smiled and calmly responded, "The family can buy the land from us, making them the full owners of both the house and the land. Then you would have to cover the cost of the land. This way, everything can be settled smoothly, and there would be no need for the family to sue you. Once they own both the house and the land, all the issues will be resolved. However, since they weren't informed about the land price when they bought the house, they will likely make you pay for it. That's not their problem to deal with, it's yours. The real issue is that the land is in a prime location, and its value could be higher than what you sold the house for. Even if you give up all your assets, it might not be enough. In the end, you could be left with nothing." I paused for a moment and continued. Another option is for you to buy the house back and then pay for the land. Of course, you have to cover the relocation fee for the family living there. This would give you back both the house and the land, and you could try selling them again, maybe making some money. But after paying for everything, you probably won't end up with much, if anything at all. Whichever option you choose, you'll be at a loss, I added. And let's not forget about alimony. Your actions have caused me a lot of mental distress, and I plan to ask for compensation for that. Keep that in mind. All this time, Paul had used me as a tool to help his career. Now that I understood this, I felt disgusted by everything he had done. I also planned to file for damages for the emotional harm he caused me, even though it might be hard to prove, and I might not win. Bringing up these issues was important, especially considering the situation he's in now. Paul, now cornered, didn't seem to have the ability to fully process what was happening. It looked like all these things could become his reality soon. My father, seeing the opportunity, added, "Even though I'm retired, I still have many connections at the company. I've been talking to some of my old colleagues, and they've told me what you've been saying about my daughter and how you've treated her. People at work have lost all respect for you. My father broke the news to Paul with a bright grin, and I could tell that he was now realizing how serious things were. He no longer cared about the money he made from selling the house without my permission, or the prestige he had earned by taking advantage of me. Now I continued, smiling and putting my hands together. Let's talk about what comes next. We must agree on the house, compensation, and asset distribution. I smiled at him now, and it was not the same grin I had ever given him. This time, I was feeling powerful and relieved, and my smile was brighter than it had been in a long time. Since our separation, I hope you understand that your assets will be decided in this meeting, I said. Paul's eyes welled up with tears, but he could only fake a chuckle. The ensuing talks worked in my favor. In addition to agreeing to give me alimony, Paul also promised to buy the land on which the house was located. In the end, everyone, aside from Paul, benefited from the deal when we gave the family who had purchased the house an explanation of everything. He lost everything. Paul's reputation suffered as a result of the company-wide rumors my father had fostered. Because of concerns from higher management, his anticipated promotion was postponed. Paul eventually lost his position in the organization as a result of the persistent rumors. Paul had quit, my father subsequently told me. You could call it karma, I suppose. When someone chooses to act, things that were acquired by taking advantage of others might go just as quickly. As for me, I now teach a sewing class and live with my parents. My lessons aren't very full, but with the help of the local ladies and kids that come, I've been able to make a respectable living. I've come to the realization that sharing what I love with others truly makes me happy, even if I was never able to sew with my own kids as I had originally hoped.